Joining us today is James Baker, Director of Law Enforcement, Operations and Support. Jim, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get right into it now. You're here to talk about a very timely and important topic, violent extremism, local impacts, and lessons learned. So what is the local impact?
Well, you know, we're going to be having a perspective series here at the conference that focuses on this subject of extreme violent behavior. And the local, really, when folks sometimes think about this, they think about international extreme violent behavior,
Sure.
Directly associated with terrorism. What we want to do is try to raise the awareness of the chiefs that are attending the conference this week that there is that type of violence happening here in the country. And it's happening in places where you don't expect it to happen. So we want the chiefs to be better prepared, having understanding, but also have the international picture of how it's influencing people locally to act out in extreme violent ways.
And when you say violent extremism is happening here, you mentioned it's not necessarily tied to extremism. It can be a whole range of various individuals with different agendas and different reasons for acting out.
That's correct, and it's interesting that when you look at a Charleston, South Carolina church shooting, or Chattanooga, Tennessee, who will be two of our guests during this perspective series, the ideology may be different, but the outcomes are the same.
Yeah.
And what we want to make sure that the chiefs are thinking about is not only a reaction to those type of incidents, but building that relationship in their community where they can start building an understanding of what's driving that thought process, hopefully identify folks, and do what we refer to as getting off an exit ramp before they're heading down that path of an extreme violent act of violence.
Yeah, well, that is the challenge, I would imagine, because the instances you cited, those are lone wolves. They weren't necessarily leaving any type of a paper trail. They weren't affiliated with a certain group, so you couldn't necessarily monitor their chatter. How do you, in a small community, make sure you have tabs on people that may be more prone to these extreme acts of violence?
You know, I think when you take a look at the incidents and some of the work that IACP is doing is we're working with our federal partners, we're working with some academic institutions, taking a look historically at these events of violence that have occurred. And the interesting thing is there are warning signs ahead of time, but people don't react to them. And I think the latest example is that the reports that are coming out of Oregon, the shooting at the community college, there were postings ahead of time by the aggressor that were ignored and not reported to the police.
So they were on Reddit.
They were on social media sites. And again, I think part of it is making the chiefs aware of it isn't just preparing to respond to it, it's preparing the community to understand that it's everyone's responsibility, just not the police departments, to be able to intercede ahead of time in an act of violence.
Now, I think you're hitting on it right now. Part of your talk about the violent extremism deals with lessons learned.
Absolutely.
So what are the lessons learned specifically that you're going to be sharing?
You know, the lessons learned are that normally most of these incidents that are happening here in the country, now I'll talk in a second about the international incidents that are normally tied to a religious ideology, a radical Muslim belief or whatever the case may be. But here in the country, it's often someone who's perceived that they've been wronged, that there's some triggering event that occurs, and they act out as a result of their belief that they've been wronged by someone, some system, some person, and there's a reaction. You know, that's the violence in the workplace. That's someone who comes back to a school and acts out at a school. It could be a mental health issue.
Yeah.
The only way that we believe that you can address this, and we're hoping to build it from those past incidents, is having that trust in the community and having the ability for the community to feel like they can come forward and report behavior, family members. You know, and I think, again, there's examples of family members who have turned in members of their family.
Still, it is a challenge for local law enforcement.
Very challenging.
To really get out in the community and make those bonds. What resources does IACP offer to deal with this?
So we work with our federal partners. We've done some work on active shooters, how to respond. We want to take, in this perspective series, we want to take a step back from that work we've done around active shooting and make the chiefs have an understanding that as being a police chief in a community, they're a focal leader in the community. People look for them, for he or she to be the leader in the community. Leadership in the community goes beyond just the response, it's the prevention piece. So we've been doing a lot of work over the last year with federal partners, as I said earlier, academic partners, taking a look at incidents in the past, developing that information, and we're starting to put together information now to be able to get out to our members, and this Perspective Series is the start of that.
Sounds good. Now, to remind everyone when exactly this talk is, it's coming up.
It's Sunday from 1 to 3 here at the Convention Center. It's the first Perspective Series of 3 here at IACP during the conference, and we encourage law enforcement leaders to come by.
I'm sure it's going to be standing room only, going to be a packed house for
Let's hope.
Jim, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.